Hey, it's Cam from Investors Underground. Welcome to another trader interview. It's been a little while since we've had someone on for this section of the YouTube channel, so I thought we'd get a very special guest to hang out with today. He started trading 6 years ago when he was 17 years old, and in a very short amount of time, he's proven to be one of the young guns to follow in the trading world. He made around $700,000 in 2014, and is a moderator and key contributor in the Investors Underground chat room. It's my pleasure to be able to chat with him for around 20 minutes today, DerrickJLeon. How you doing, Derrick?
Hey Cam, I'm doing great.
So tell us something about yourself pre-trading life.
Pre-trading life, I was a nerd. I was a guy in the classroom, who wasn't really extroverted. I was more introverted. I kept to myself most of the time. Kept to my studies, my education. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Everybody in high school really they had this plan. I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna be a nurse, or I'm gonna be the next NFL pick. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. I knew my dad was a businessman, and I wanted to pursue something to that extent, but I didn't know exactly what. So my parents ended up filing for divorce in my sophomore year, and it took a big toll on me. That divorce took a big toll on me. So I ended up dropping out of high school. I went into my habits. I started playing video games nonstop just to get away from everything. And my dad was okay with me, not going to school. He didn't really care. I was 17 at the time, and so I was watching TV one night. Came across a commercial, it was E-Trade with the talking babies, and I got interested in it. So I called my uncle and I asked him a couple questions about the stock market, and that's where I got my first gist of trading.
And what did you do next?
Well, I researched a lot about it. I did my research, and I saw some gurus, who would make a couple $100 a day, and I'm like, wow, you can make $200-300 a day, and I'm sitting there just thinking, like, that's a lot of money, and I want to get started. So, I opened an E-Trade account, a Guardian account, and, looked up some services, found a guru in penny stocks, and that's where I had my first start, my first trade. It was in that newsletter.
So how exactly did that turn out for you?
So I paid my market tuition with that first newsletter. I ended up learning a lot of mistakes that I did. I was a sheep, I chased the trades that the guru would go long. And obviously most of these stocks were low-float stocks, so you end up chasing that at a bigger price. And, I got burnt. So I got burnt, and I took a step back, and I stopped trading for a bit, and decided, I actually need to learn how to trade, how to pick my entries and my exits, because I can't keep chasing stocks.
So your first experience with trading sounded like a pretty negative one. What takeaways did you have from that, and what was your next plan of attack?
Well, I refunded my account with E-Trade again. I started it back up with around $10,000 to $15,000. I don't remember the exact dollar amount. And I told myself, no more chasing. Pick your entries and pick your exits yourself. Don't rely on others to do that for you. So I started doing that, and awesome penny stocks rolled around, penny pick rolled around, and best damn penny stocks rolled around as well. So I started taking my own trades. I took my own trades in that. Didn't really pay attention to the guru, what he was doing. I was just talking to people and learning how to get better. And that's what I ended up doing. I had a good solid run on the penny stocks, and that was the start of something. That was the taste of what trading could actually become in my future.
So penny stocks gave you a first kind of glimpse of the trading world and what was possible. But if my memory serves me correct, it was around about that same time that the SEC and FINRA halted a bunch of those sketchy stocks and pretty much destroyed the penny stock and OTC market. Was it around that time that you sought out new strategies and at the same time met Nate?
So I funded an account with ShareTrader, and decided to learn what shorting stocks were. I talked to a few people who were in that chat room at the time, who were shorting stocks. So I was trying to short a stock, that I thought that had a overextended move, and someone in the chat room said, Nate thinks thinks that this grinds and squeezes out more. He thinks it's a short squeeze. And I asked the person, who's Nate? And he says, well, he runs this service. And I checked out his service. I talked to a few people, and they had some pretty good reviews on him. At the time, Nate was pretty small. And I decided to join his service after that trade. It was a learning experience for sure. The chat room I was in compared to Nate's chat room is a whole different level. Nate's is pure professional, pure business, and then the other one was more of laid back, let's have drinks, let's party, because we just made some money. So people would actually go talk about random stuff in the other chat room, and I like Nate's chat room better because he kept it more professional. So that's where I learned.
So what was your strategy coming into the Investors Underground community?
Well, in my previous newsletter, I had the experience, hey, no chasing, no taking positions that you're unfamiliar with. And so that's the approach I took to Investors Live when I started his service. There's a lot of great information being posted, and there's a lot of traders that are taking different trades all the time. So the approach that I took is, learn who the top dogs are in that room, and, learn from them. Just watch their commentary and chat, watch what they do, watch their entries, watch their exits. I would ask myself, why are they taking this position versus asking the person why are they taking the position. I had that drive to learn. So I would ask myself the question. I would repeat the question to me, why are they taking this position? And eventually I would find the answer.
So basically you're watching all the top guys in the Investors Underground community closely, what they were trading, what they were looking for, how they were entering and exiting positions, and you started to formulate your own ideas.
Oh yeah, definitely. I developed my own strategy, picking ideas from this person and that person. And mingled a lot of those strategies together, and that's what made me the trader I am today.
So tell us a little bit about your strategy then.
All right, so I'm going to talk about my longs. So what I like to see in a long position is, the stock has had some sort of PR, some sort of news, some sort of filing that causes the stock price to go up. And, I pay attention to how much people are shorting it versus, how big the float is. So if I can determine, a first move breakout, if it actually holds, I'll actually look for longs because I know shorts think it's negative news, the stock price is going right back to where it came from. And so that's one of my favorite types of plays is looking for the short squeezes, what stocks are making higher lows, what stocks are heavily shorted, what stocks have news, is there manipulation behind the stock? That's the type of moves I'm looking for on longs. And those are one of my favorite types of plays.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. It's almost like the first move is created by the news, and maybe some foolish shorts get involved at that stage. Then the second move is created by smart longs coming in, and the first set of those shorts cover, and they really propel the stock to that next level. And the top sort of formed when foolish longs enter, while the smart longs take their profits, and smart shorts start in, and the stock ends up coming back to earth. Sounds like that's kind of what you're looking for from your long strategy. Is it also what you're looking for from your short strategy as well?
When I realize the chart is overextended, once the longs have been, exhausted and the shorts are exhausted, I start trying to look for trades I can swing. I've been getting more into it, and, I've nailed some big ones like Cuba, 80XX, and Gain as of current. So that's what I'm looking for is overextended news with companies, who are diluting shares, who are selling, at higher prices, or, who have some sort of offering or secondary that's coming. And that's the type of moves I'm looking for.
So thinking back to the time when you were struggling with your trading and having blown up a couple of accounts, did you ever think that trading wasn't for you?
Oh yeah, there's been plenty of times, I asked myself that a lot. I actually just recently asked myself that question on NDRM. I ended up losing $100,000 in one day, and I asked myself, is day trading really for me? That's the psychological part of trading for me. I doubted myself almost at every turn, every time I have a loss, and I just stuck to it. I persevered. My dad always told me if I stuck my mind to something, to see it through, to see it done, and that's exactly what I did with trading. I'm not gonna lie, there were some days there, I cursed trading, and I decided, trading wasn't for me. And I wish I never crossed paths with trading, because there were some rough patches in my life where trading did bite me in the ass. So
as you started having success, what was driving you? What were you measuring yourself by? Was it just the dollars stacking in your account?
It was more than just making money. Trading's fun. Making the money part is fun. But, I like the challenge, I guess. I like the challenge of being able to stick with something. And it's always been about the challenge for me, whether or not I can make it. The money comes and it's fun. Don't get me wrong. It's always been about me pushing myself to another level as far as on a personal development level. And trading was that tool that challenged me. And it challenged me to a level that I've never been pushed to. Blowing my accounts. Barely having any money to survive on. And I decided to persevere and get it done.
So as the Derrick that you are now, if you had a time machine and you could go back and give Derrick Jr. some advice, what would it be?
I would tell myself, stop averaging down on positions or averaging up, letting trades go against you. Invest in your education and study more. That's what I would tell myself, because back then I was stubborn, I had to take bigger losses. And definitely I think the biggest thing I would tell myself, is invest in your education, because that's always important. You're investing in your own business.
So where do you think people should get started?
To be honest, some sort of service with credibility behind it. I wish that Nate's DVD would have came out sooner. I think that would have saved me a couple headaches. You know, that actually helped me read charts a lot better and see why stocks are actually moving or why they aren't moving. And obviously DVD 2 as well. That's something that definitely changed my trading career around. So, I mean, that's one key factor, you know, is those DVDs. Nate's video lessons as well. I mean, that's been another thing that's helped my trading because we can recap at the end of the day. So definitely, you know, find some sort of way to invest in your education, something that's going to help you, that you know it's going to help you, you know.
So enough about Nate for a little while. Who are the other guys in the community who have really helped you through the process of your trading?
Well, let me tell you one thing. There's been 2 traders that have been with me since the start of Investors Underground, and that's Elkwood, Eric Wood. I think he was only a year in or 2 years in. He was around when I only had $5,000 to my name. And, you know, I always asked him for advice. You know, he gave me what advice he could or what he saw in the stock chart. Or, you know, he's been with me since day one. I will always respect him for that. You know, I always looked up to him. Always looked up to what he did, you know, because there'd be days where he'd make multiple 5 figures, and I'd be like, wow, I really want to get to that level. So he's been one of my biggest inspirations, is Eric. Another trader that, you know, helped me along the way too is another guy. His name is Tanner. You know, it's Free Flow. So he helped me, you know, with technical analysis and what he saw. Another person that has like helped change my career path has been Phil. You know, I've been watching his calls, watching his entries and his exits, and they're always on point. So he's another mentor that still helps me out to this day. You know, and I always ask him for advice too, and you know he gives it to me. So he's another guy. Obviously, my top 5 traders in IU would probably be Investors Live, you know, Free Flow, Crawfish, Phil, and Eric, and Sandro.
It's pretty cool to have a place that you can get the right network of people to support you and to support them back. So anyway, a totally phenomenal year in 2014 for you. Have you had to kind of pinch yourself to see if it's really real?
Yeah, I've had to pinch myself. It is Cloud 9 type stuff, so I have to get back on to Earth sometimes, you know, and I'll have emails, you know. This is why I have email set up, because people ask me questions all the time, you know. I hear people hear their stories and how they're struggling, and it just keeps me in check. It keeps me in line from taking bigger losses, I guess. Because, you know, the journey here, you know, I could always be back at where I started, you know, if I take a big loss.
So now that you're crushing the markets, has that kind of changed you as a person? Do you compare yourself with friends working 9 to 5 or the people you went to high school with?
So I knew I never wanted the 9 to 5 job. I knew that wasn't for me. I didn't want to slave myself to a corporation or anything like that. So, yeah, has trading changed me as a person? It has. I'm not going to lie. I don't compare myself to people in high school or people I grew up with. You know, they're doing their own thing. I'm doing my own thing. And I think it'd be, you know, pretty bad to compare myself to others. So it's made me realize I think I've always been a person with a good heart. So it's given me even a bigger heart to help other people out. I told myself, you know, I want to help out my mom a little bit more because she's struggling. So, you know, I help her out, you know. I help my grandma. I help out several family members that are currently in need of help. But yeah, it has changed me. Not in a bad way, more in a good way. Obviously, there's some issues that I have to work on. You know, I am young. Sometimes, you know, I get a little bit of ego going there. But, you know, it's something I'm working on, something that I'm developing, you know, personal development.
So I've noticed recently on Twitter that you've been attracting some attention from people who don't exactly like what you're doing. Why do you think that is, and what would you say to them?
Are you talking about my haters? Yeah, I've developed more haters, or more people who are trolling me. I think it's because, you know, they see this high school kid. You know, I dropped out, but, you know, I eventually did graduate. You know, I have no college education. It pisses them off. You know, they went to college to get an education, you know, to work, to make a decent living. And here they see a 23-year-old kid that didn't go to college, has no education, you know, has poor grammar skills. It really messes with their mind. So, you know, first, trying to judge, look at yourself and ask yourself, what can you change about your personality to make you a more successful person?
So how are you going to keep learning and continue to grow as a trader?
By doing the same thing I've done the past 2 years, you know, looking at other people's calls and looking at what they see. You know, the stock market's a never-ending learning game. And the day you decide you've learned enough is the day that you're going to fail. You know, the stock market's always adjusting. Strategies need to be changed. And so I plan, you know, keep on learning, keeping myself humble, and readjusting my strategies. You know, you have to readjust your strategies every 2-3 months to meet the market, you know. So that's my plan. Learn more on the fundamentals too. Like, that's another thing I need to work on, is working more on the fundamental side of moves, you know, because I want to be a bigger type of trader, you know. I'm not a scalper. I try not to be a scalper anymore. I'm always looking for the bigger picture trade. So
I think your story really identifies with some of the younger traders who are looking to establish themselves and develop a strategy of their own. What advice would you give to those guys?
So there's a lot of young guys out there, that are trying to make trading their career. If you really want trading, I'm speaking directly to you guys. If you really want trading, you're gonna go through ups and downs. You're gonna go through the learning curve. But it's up to you whether or not you stay in the game, whether you cut your losses or not. So obviously, I'm pretty young. I'm only 23, and if I have one thing to say to you guys is, challenge the status quo. Don't go slave yourselves to corporations. Don't go work 9 to 5. You only have one life. Trading has definitely given me that tool to challenge the status quo. I actually want to live my life now while I'm young, because I want to do what I want with who I want whenever I want, and that's what I have to say to you guys.
And we've got an even younger member in the Investors Underground community, Nico, who's only 20 years old and made himself over $300,000 in 2014 itself. Do you guys catch up much and talk strategy together? Is it cool to see another young gun succeeding in the market as well?
Well, yeah, no, it's awesome to see Nico do what he's doing. I mean, it's great seeing what he's done so far in trading. The kid, he makes a lot of money. He made 6 figures before the age of 20. Like, that's something that not many people do. Nico is someone that definitely everyone should be paying attention to. Because he is the next $1 million kid.
Crazy fact about Nico: he also made $112,000 in the month of February 2015 alone. Maybe you guys would be racing to that $1 million mark together. I guess hitting that $1 million figure is a big goal in your trading right now.
Oh yeah, it's been a goal for me for quite some time. I would always tell myself I'd make $1 million before the age of 24. I think I'll definitely hit it by October 8th. October 8th, I hit 24 years old.
So if members are reaching out to you in the Investors Underground community, what kind of questions do you like versus questions that you don't really like?
The questions I don't like is questions that Google can answer and Investopedia can answer. To me, if you ask me a type of question that Google can easily answer, it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of your time. I like high quality questions. From people who I know who put effort into trading. Who put effort into studying. By the type of question you ask me, I can almost guarantee you I can tell what type of trader you are. So if you ask me a question whether or not you should be in a position, you shouldn't be in a position. If you ask me what I see because you're underwater, I don't think you should be in a position whatsoever. You shouldn't be asking me those questions. You should be asking me what potentially I see a trade. If you ask me, hey Derrick, I see higher lows in this trade. What do you see? Obviously, I'm going to respond to that question. I'm going to tell you what I see and what I would love to see happen. If I see resistance points and you tell me, hey Derrick, I see a resistance point here at $17 or at $18 a share, I'm going to tell you, that's what I see too as well. So just ask me a high quality question. Don't ask me questions that Google can easily answer.
So what can we expect to see from the future from DerrickJLeon?
What you can expect to see from me is, being more consistent, bringing my trading to a less stressful level, and just being a more consistent trader, knocking out the home runs every once in a while, but, batting for singles, because that's what I want to do. I want to live a low stress, a stress-free life, and trading can be stressful at times, and we choose whether we make it stressful or we make it easy, So that's what I want to do. And I think you're going to see a more relaxed Derrick in the year to come.